Okay, so good morning, everyone. I think we'll make a start now. I hope you're all well. My name is Sheryl. I'm a key relationship manager at Lawyer Checker. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will be familiar with Lawyer Checker. But for those of you who don't know us, Lawyer Checker was set up in 2013 to work with law firms to offer them the best protection via enhanced due diligence in relation to your fund transfers. So whether that be in relation to residential conveyancing, whether it's commercial property, or even other departments such as private client estate administration, anywhere where there is a movement of money, the Lawyer Checker services can be used to protect that process. So thank you for joining our joint webinar this morning with Powered by Pi and PSG. This webinar is aimed at raising awareness of the risks associated with the current market and our new way of working, but also to help us polish up on our knowledge of the Lawyer Checker service and to get us thinking about how we can work in a much safer and consistent way moving forward. Now, I'm sure there'll be some people on this webinar who are returning from being on furlough, or you may have started a new role recently. So hopefully over the next half an hour or so, I'll be able to give you some food for thought on how to return to work and protect your transactions, or how you can continue to work in a compliant and safe manner. So a quick look at the agenda then for this morning. Firstly, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what we are currently seeing in the market. It's safe to say that the market and our way of working has changed considerably over the last couple of months. Secondly, I'm going to be sharing 5 top tips on how you can protect your firm and your conveyancing transactions. Next, we are going to do an overview of the Lawyer Checker service with a refresh session on what results you can expect and what they mean. I also have an update to share with you in relation to the Lawyer Checker service, which is an addition that we have made in response to the lockdown to ensure that we can continue to help mitigate risk. And finally, we are going to look at the importance of taking a consistent approach and why this is key to operating a robust due diligence process. So over the last few months, I've been in contact with many of our clients, business friends in the sector, suppliers, and it's safe to say that nearly everyone has had to make some difficult decisions in relation to their staffing levels recently. So early on in the lockdown, the property market stopped, which meant that instructions levels have been low and income was uncertain. And this has led many firms to furloughing a high volume of staff or even making some of their staff redundant. It was then announced a few weeks later that the property market was reopened effectively, so all of that pent-up work and those paused transactions could finally be progressed forward. Now, one of the main issues with this, of course, is that a majority of firms are now operating at a significantly reduced capacity. The remaining teams are having to work extended hours and they're having to pick up files and cases which weren't originally being dealt with by their furloughed colleagues. So it's safe to say that at the moment, resource levels are low, whilst work levels are currently very high. Now, interestingly, I was reading an article on one of the Today's publications, which was about the lockdown and cash flow issues in firms. So in this article, it discussed a study which was published in the Law Gazette, which found that 55% of firms spoken to had insufficient cash on their balance sheets to cover 1 month's operating expenses. And 38% of those firms spoken to didn't have enough funds to cover 1 month's worth of salary. These are really scary figures, and I think it highlights the risk that many firms are facing at the moment in relation to going bust and going into administration. I'm sure many of you will agree that we're still to see the worst impact of this lockdown, and there's certainly a rocky road ahead for all of us. So we're going to see many more firms going into administration, and it's important that from a risk point of view, that we are staying up to date in terms of what's happening in our market. And we're also going to see a number of mergers and acquisitions. We've seen some big ones already, and with these mergers comes a change in bank account details. So again, staying on top of your due diligence around bank details and funds transfers has never been more important. So let's have a think about some of the key risks the current market poses to firms. The first and most obvious risk at the moment is human error. As we've already discussed, firms are under an increased amount of pressure, dealing with high workloads and having very little resource. So as fee earners try to progress cases forward faster, the more likely they are to make mistakes. And fraudsters are well aware of the current danger, and they will use this something called a type so mistakes in high rates we will dealing with didn't necessarily start with and you've picked up from your furloughed colleagues during lockdown. Alternatively, you may be returning to work from being furloughed, and so you'll be picking up some new files that you didn't deal with from the beginning. Either way, we need to be thinking about the risks associated with this process. So for many of these new files, you may be unfamiliar with the firm that you're dealing with on the other side of the transaction. You may also be unfamiliar with the client themselves, given that we're no longer seeing clients in person. And given that we have this unfamiliarity with the other side, it's never been more important to carry out thorough due diligence checks on the other side prior to sending funds over to them. This is the perfect market for a fraudster. We have a large majority of people now working remotely, meaning that those people are isolated from their usual protection in the office environments. If you're working alone or you're returning to work, at your home office, you will be making judgments on matters without guidance from your colleagues, and this will make you an easier target. You may be joining a team who are under a lot of pressure to progress cases forward faster, and so you may be inclined to rush. But it's so important that your due diligence on the other side is thorough, that you feel like you know who you are dealing with, and you are satisfied with this before you send funds anywhere. So we've had to think about some of the risks associated with the current market and how you may be currently operating in your firm. What I'd like to do now is share my 5 top tips on how you can protect your firm and your transactions. So my first top tip is to make sure you carry out your due diligence on the other side. We are now working in a market where, unfortunately, firms will go into administration. There is going to be increased cybercrime and fraudulent activity in this sector. And even if you feel like you know the firm well, you may not know what is happening in the background. So it's really important that you carry out that due diligence to enable you to get a clear picture at the very start of the transaction. So my first top tip is carry out your due diligence on the other side. My next top tip is to have a plan when transferring funds. So having a plan enables you to adopt a consistent approach, and a consistent approach is my third top tip, so it seems logical to combine these two together as they are linked. Now, our advice to you is that you should look to complete a lawyer checker search when sending funds to a firm as early on in the transaction as possible. The same applies when you're sending funds to an individual, of course, where we recommend you use our consumer bank account checker service. Having a plan and having a consistent approach allows you to be agile as a business as well. So you may have staff coming off furlough or more staff going on furlough, and so you may have different lawyers dealing with different parts of the transaction. If everyone knows what they are doing, you take a consistent approach and you don't just have individuals doing their own thing. You should be able to reduce the risk, the level of the risk that's involved, as you have an evidenceable process that you can back up. I think another key thing to note as well, in particular in relation to consistency, is the conversation that you're then able to have with your insurer. So you're in a much stronger position when you are telling your insurer what you are doing rather than asking them what you should be doing. So having an evidenceable, consistent approach to due diligence allows you to paint a much stronger external picture on how serious you take your due diligence, how careful your team are, and I think that this is a really powerful message for you to share with your insurer when it comes down to your indemnity insurance. My fourth top tip is to be suspicious of email. So I've already mentioned that this is the perfect market for a fraudster. We're likely to see a spike in fraudulent activity. In fact, we've already seen some cybercrime activity directly related to COVID-19. Now, I'm sure that you're all aware that email is naturally unsecure, and unfortunately, whilst we're all working at home, it is without doubt our main method of communication to both clients and the firm acting on the other side. So fraudsters will sit in the back of your emails. They will watch you for weeks in terms of the language that you're using, who you speak to most often, and they will find a way to use your email for fraudulent activity. A key risk in relation to emails at the moment in particular is that whilst you have members of your team furloughed, or where you've had to make the decision to make some of your team redundant, fraudsters will actively target their email accounts as they may not currently be monitored. So it's important that you're careful about the messaging as well that you're putting out there to fraudsters who may be using these social engineering techniques to try and spot this. My final top tip is to acknowledge human error and mistakes do happen. Now, we've spoken about how your team may be stretched very thinly at the moment. You're all working incredibly hard to get through these paused transactions, but it's vital that you have a robust process in place to pick up on errors before you go too far and send the money over. Everyone needs to know what this process is, and the process must be clear, documented, and evidenceable. So we've had a think about some of the risks, and I've shared my top tips with you. Now what I'd like to talk about is how Powered by PSG, in collaboration with us at Lawyer Checker, can support you to mitigate some of these risks, to have a documented process in place, and to help you paint that really strong message to your insurer around your indemnity insurance. So the service that I'd like to tell you about then is the account and entity screen. This is our core service. It's what we're most well known for at Lawyer Checker. And effectively, the account and entity screen is a law firm to law firm bank account verification service, which verifies the bank account details of the firm acting on the other side of the transaction. So the Lawyer Checker database determines whether or not the bank account details you have searched against have a good track record of usage within conveyancing. Now, 85% of the searches that you'll put in are returned immediately with a frequent result. Now, as part of the checks that we're carrying out in relation to the account and entity screen, we have a direct API into the SRA. So if there are any scam alerts, notices, or conditions that we think you need to be aware of, this information will be provided to you within your account and entity screen result. And that's real live data, so it's constantly updated. Now, I mentioned earlier that I had an update for you in relation to the account and entity screen service. And we've already spoken about how the risks of, over the next couple of months, we're going to see many, many more firms going into administration. There will be firms that are going to struggle to come out of this lockdown, unfortunately, and that does pose a risk, particularly when we're dealing with client money and assets. So as part of our updates for you, we have included a credit safe check within the account and entity screen result, so that we are checking company's house, and if there is a change in the status of a law firm in terms of whether or not they're going into administration, you will be informed of this as part of your account and entity screen results. So that information is important that you have it, and what we don't want is you dealing with the firm on the other side, they then go into administration, you don't know about it, and you can continue to send funds over to them. So that information is now included within your results. So from an account and entity screen result, you can get 3 results. These are frequent, infrequent, and unknown. So let's think about this practically then. Before you send money over to the firm acting on the other side of the transaction, you need to determine 2 things. The first thing is that the bank account details that you hold for that particular law firm do in fact relate to that law firm, and they haven't been tampered with in any way or changed in any way. And you also need to determine that the firm itself is a genuine law firm and you're not dealing with a bogus law firm. So the information that we require to carry out an account and entity screen search is very simple. We need the bank account details of the firm that you're searching against, the name of that firm, the SRA CLC's number, and then just some information in relation to the transaction itself. And once you've clicked submit, as I said earlier, you get 1 of 3 results. So the first result that you can get back from account and entity screen then is a frequent result. This means that the bank account details you have searched against, they have a good and successful track record of usage within conveyancing. We've seen those bank account details previously. Lots of other firms have carried out searches against them, and we believe that they relate to that law firm. This should act as a bit of a green flag for you. You get this result immediately as PDF, and it just means that you can then put that PDF on your case file as evidence that you've carried out the necessary checks in relation to the bank details and in relation to the law firm itself before you send money over to them. So again, that PDF is evidenceable, it's documented, and you can keep it on your case file as evidence of the checks that you've carried out. The next type of result you can get then is an infrequent. So this means that we've seen the bank account details previously, but we haven't seen them very often. This isn't necessarily a red flag, but it just means that we think that you ought to have some additional information around the law firm itself before you proceed with sending money over to them. And again, the final result you can get then is an unknown. So this means that we haven't seen those bank account details previously, they don't have a good track record of usage within conveyancing, and again, we think you ought to have some additional information in the law firm itself before you send money over to them. So if you were to get an infrequent or an unknown result from your account and entity screen, this automatically triggers our further research reports, which is carried out by our in-house team. And the purpose of this further research is to be able to build a content-rich report with some further information in relation to them, so that you can then make an informed decision whether or not you're going to proceed with sending money over to them. So part of this further research then, our team look into 12 different databases to build up this report. Some of the things that we're looking at is whether or not the firm is SRA CLC regulated, any transfers of value done in the last year, do they have an SRA badge on their website? Now, this is something that I think is really, really important, particularly over the last couple of weeks. We're seeing this a lot, where there are lots of bogus websites going up, bogus websites, which can be really misleading, and they do look really genuine. So again, it's really important that these checks are being carried out and that you have this information. So the SRA badge, we're checking Companies House, again, that credit safe check as well. So if a firm goes into administration, you're going to know about it. We've got the direct API into the SRA, so all of that live data in relation to scam alerts, notices or conditions, you're going to know about that. And even something really simple as well as Google search and Street View. So can we see from Google's Street View that the firm is a genuine entity, that they have a sign that is visible from the street, or do they have an office that we can see? Now, our further research reports are returned to you within 4 working hours. We've never taken that long, it's usually about an hour and a half, but that content-rich report then enables you to make an informed decision about whether or not you believe that it's a genuine firm that you're dealing with, and whether or not you feel comfortable sending money over to them. And once you've got that further research report, that is then a second layer of evidence that you have on your case file in terms of the checks that you've done and how you reached your decision to proceed with sending money over to them. So it's a layered approach to the due diligence. So when to carry out an account and entity screen search then? So we highly recommend that the account and entity screen search is carried out very early on in the transaction, so that you can paint that really clear picture on the law firm itself at the very start. So we recommend it's just after applies to requisitions on title. We also offer a free update search. So let's say, for example, your transaction goes on for a little longer than you had originally expected, or even if it doesn't, the day you send the money, just before you send it over to the firm on the other side, we highly recommend you do the update search. It's free of charge, and it just means that if any information has changed from that original account and entity screen result, anything that you think we ought to know, if the status of the firm has changed, if there's a scam alert that you should be aware of, any new information that you should be aware of, it just means that you've then got that in your update search, which you can then keep on your case file. And again, it's just mitigating that risk just before you send that money over to the firm. And as I said earlier, once you've got your further research report, you've got 2 reports on file. It demonstrates a layered approach to your due diligence, and it's evidence that if you have had to, in terms of what you used to verify the firm and the bank details, and how you reached the decision in terms of proceeding with the transaction. So consistency is key when it comes to due diligence. We highly recommend that Lawyer Checker is used on every single transaction. And the reason that we recommend it's used on every single transaction is that it enables you to adhere to Principle 10 of the SRA Code of Conduct in terms of protecting client money and assets. Now, it doesn't say protect some clients' money and some assets. You should be protecting all clients' money and all assets. Why, why would you take the risk on some clients and not others? If something went wrong, how would you explain to the SRA that you made that decision, the decision? And not only that, you're protecting your firm, you're protecting your practicing certificate, and you've got that documented proof of process. The process is key. When you think about it from a regulator's point of view, they want to see that you have a robust process in place. You need to have the evidence. It needs to be documented. And this is what the Lawyer Checker service can help you do. The account and entity screen results, if you use it on every single transaction, it just means that everybody knows what they're doing. Consistency is key, particularly at the moment where we've got lots of staff moving around, some coming off furlough, some going on furlough, and you've got different people dealing with different areas in the transaction. It's just important that everybody knows what they're doing, and this consistency will enable you to reduce the amount of risk that you're currently facing in relation to the fund transfers. So the account entity screen service is £12 plus VAT. We highly recommend that that's recharged onto your clients. So effectively, this should be a cost neutral service to you. And we've got documentation for your client care packs that can help you do that. But for the sake of from the client's point of view, for the sake of £12 plus VAT compared to the amount that you could end up losing, I think it's a no-brainer. You get it used on every single transaction. Make sure it's robust and the process is in place. And you'll be able to act and you'll be able to continue working in a much safer way. So as a summary of what we discussed this morning, then we've spoken about how your team may be very stretched at the moment, and we need to acknowledge that mistakes will happen. So having a robust and documented process in place will help you mitigate some of this risk, in particular as well in relation to human error whilst we're all busy. So let's say, for example, there's a typo in the bank details or something like that. The account and entity screen service will pick up on this error before you send money over to the other side. And again, consistency is key. So whilst we've got staff returning from furlough or you've got staff moving around, it's important that everybody knows what they're doing. You have set that robust process in place, set as standard, and it means that you can continue to work and progress cases forward much safer. It's vital at the moment to carry out due diligence on the other side. So we're currently working in a very uncertain market. Firms will go into administration. It's never been more important to get that clear picture on who you're dealing with before you send money over to them. And of course, Powered by Pi, in partnership with Lawyer Checker, can support you to do this. So we can support you to mitigate that risk. We can support you to have that documented process in place, and we can help you paint that really strong due diligence process, when it comes down to speaking to your insurer as well. So that's all from me this morning. I hope I've given you some food for thought in relation to the Lawyer Checker services, in relation to some of the risks that you're currently facing, and how Powered by Pi and PSG can help you to mitigate some of this risk. Here are our contact details on the screen there. So if you did have any questions around what the next steps would be in relation to getting Lawyer Checker implemented into your firm, please do get in touch with us. But I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon and a great rest of the week, and speak to you all again soon. Thank you very much.